Hi everyone, welcome to Roving Through Books, and today we'll be discussing In the Company of Men by Véronique Tadjo. Yes. We are introduced to different perspectives in this book. The book is told through very many narrators' perspectives, and one of them is the baobab tree. So the baobab tree represents nature, and he tells us that, human beings have done certain things to destroy the environment. They do not respect nature. They do not treat nature as it ought to be treated. The only thing humans do is take, 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 and take without thinking of returning anything back. Some forests have not only reduced in sizes, some have even disappeared. There are so many species of animals that have gone totally extinct because of human behaviors, and that's what the baobab tree was telling us. The genesis of this story starts with two boys who get a bat, they kill a bat and then they eat it. And from there, we can just link it to the entire story and say, this is how the Ebola pandemic began. These boys are living in a village settlement, and you can see that in a village settlement, ordinary village settlement in Africa, everybody is it's a communal form of living in the sense that everybody is in the community, so you relate with everybody. So it is not a setting where one can live in isolation, except one is placed on a form of punishment. That is when a person can live in isolation. But ordinarily, everybody interacts with everybody. So when these boys get contaminated and infected with Ebola virus, it spreads. I'm going to be talking about the human relationship in this book. So there were quite a number of human relationships. And one of them that really struck me was the one of a man and his fiancee. They'd been together and they said, okay, let's just go to the hospital to see if we have or we don't have the Ebola virus in us. The presumption is since they are together, it would be almost impossible for one person to have it and another person not to have it. So, whichever case, it has to be the same thing for the two of them. But they get there and then they're being isolated, and they realize after some tests that, the man doesn't have the virus, but his fiancee does. So she's taken to where treatment is being given. And he writes love letters to her, like, I'm your steadfast love, blah, blah, blah. All the things that love letters contain, especially in a time of pandemic. And he expects that, his fiance will be one of the people who makes it out. But she doesn't. And it reminds me of what Véronique Tadjo does with this story. We hear of the numbers of the Ebola pandemic. We hear many of them, but many of us do not think that they are human beings and not just numbers. So when I read this particular story, it just made me click that it broke down the walls and the barriers between I and the victims in the sense that I saw them as people and not just numbers. Another human perspective I will talk about is that of a mother and her children. When mothers see their children being infected with illnesses, different things go through their head. And we learn of a story in the beginning chapters of a woman who knew fully well her sons had Ebola and she refused to let them go. So she decided to follow them. When the ambulance came to pick them up, she decided to follow them. To her, there was no point living without her children. And there's another repeat story that was even in a village. There was another repeat story of similar events, but in a city, a woman refusing to continue life outside of her children's existence. And it was a very, very painful thing. Another perspective was that of a person who lived with survivor's guilt. The person had survived Ebola, and many of the people around this person, they had died. So when this person was given free admittance back into the society, we learned that fear is stronger than science because, yes, he has been medically certified to be clear of the virus, but people did not want to have anything to do with him. They felt like if he had it, maybe it's still somewhere or something. You know the way humans are with sentiments, especially in cases where many people die from a pandemic as serious as Ebola. It will be very difficult to accept that a person has recovered, especially when you know the number of casualties. But this person did. Anyways, this person decided that, oh, since nobody was going to welcome him back into society, he would rather channel the energy into working with people that were fighting against Ebola. Then the last human perspective that really touched me was that of a specialist. He was a specialist doctor, the only specialist in his field in that country, and he contacted Ebola. So people rallied around to say, oh, we need to fly this man out of the country so he can get adequate treatment. But we know how bureaucratic some countries can be, and with time, nobody responded. People were saying no. People in the higher authority were saying no, he doesn't have to go. We can manage it here and whatnot. People were still pushing, let this man get treatment. But eventually, the sickness got progressively worse. And that was when it was approved for him to leave the country. But it was already too late for that to change anything. And so he died. So bear in mind, this story is set in a fictional West African country. So it is not like we learned that it is from Sierra Leone or anything of the sort. It is a fictional West African country. And lastly, because it's a fictional West African country, we learn that corruption is something that destroys lives. I know we say it, but when people were given funds to fight against Ebola in this fictional country, in this book, would you believe? I'm sure you will believe that some politicians decided to divert the funds. Like they gave them funds for eradicating Ebola pandemic, and some people decided, oh, it's best if this thing stays with me. If my family and I and my friends and I we enjoy this, that's blood money. That's oweje in my language. That is blood money, and I was so angry because I could relate, not just because not just because it was a West African country, but because as at this year we saw that palliatives that were being distributed during the time of COVID were now being redistributed as part of canvassing for votes ahead of 2027 elections. So that is how corrupt these people are. It's not even just funds they are diverting, even palliatives, like palliatives that definitely have an expiry date. They definitely have palliatives that are supposed to be shared since 2020. We are in 2026 and you are sharing them now. So, yes, I think the major lesson this book teaches as a conclusion is that as humans, we should learn to treat the environment better. We should not disregard the environment. I cannot say what is going to be our fate if things keep going on as this. If the heat is going to get progressively worse, if we are not going to have Amatan by the end of this year, I don't even know. I don't know. But what I do know is that if we channel our energy positively, if we do the right things, then perhaps the right things will happen.